The mirage of strength. Australia, the land of beaches, booming skylines, and billion-dollar exports. For decades, the world has looked here and seen success, steady growth, low unemployment, and the image of a country that somehow dodged every global crisis. But what if that strength is an illusion? What if, behind the glossy headlines and the economic records, there's a story few dare to tell, a story of stagnation, inequality, and quiet decline hidden beneath the numbers? Because if you zoom in, the cracks begin to show. Australia's GDP looks strong, yet living standards haven't budged in over a decade. Wages are flat, productivity has stalled, household debt among the highest in the world, and while cities grow taller and richer, the average Australian feels smaller, squeezed by prices, by pressure, by promises that no longer add up. This is the untold story of the lucky country, and how its luck may finally be running out. This is why Australia's economy isn't as strong as it looks. The lucky country. For most of its modern history, Australia has been a story of extraordinary fortune, a country so vast, and so sparsely populated that its potential seemed endless. In the decades after World War II, while Europe rebuilt and Asia industrialized, Australia quietly carved out its own miracle, a middle-class nation built on stability, immigration, and a promise that tomorrow would always be better than today. This was the era of what economists called the Australian settlement, an unspoken deal between government, business, and workers. The country would dig and export its wealth, protect local industries, and share the spoils through secure jobs and growing wages. Through the 1960s and 70s, that dream felt real. The mining booms of Western Australia, the wool trade, the manufacturing surge all combined to lift a generation. By the 1980s, Australia had joined the ranks of the world's richest democracies. Its living standards rivaled the US and the UK. Its cities became global icons of prosperity. In 1991, Australia faced its last major recession. Since then, it's been almost 30 years of uninterrupted growth, one of the longest streaks in modern economic history. Economists called it the Australian miracle. But beneath that record-breaking headline, the nature of the growth was changing quietly, but dramatically. Where once growth came from innovation and production, it was now powered by something far more fragile: population growth, housing expansion, and the global hunger for Australia's raw materials. The lucky country wasn't just lucky, it was living off the luck of the earth. And while the minerals flowed, the economy glittered. But when you look closer, you see it. The wealth didn't spread evenly. Productivity growth slowed. Manufacturing declined. The economy became more dependent on mining, on migration, and on money pouring into property. It worked until the world changed. The turning point, the hidden crisis in early 2020. The lights dimmed across the world, and for the first time in decades, Australia's economy stood still. The government intervened fast. Interest rates dropped to almost zero. Billions were pumped into the system to keep households afloat. On paper, it worked. Australia avoided the deep recessions that hit the US or Europe. But something else began to brew beneath the surface. Cheap money flooded the property market. Investors, unable to find returns elsewhere, turned to real estate, pushing home prices into the stratosphere. Within 2 years, the median Australian home jumped by more than 30%. In Sydney, even middle-class families were locked out of ownership. The wealth gap widened, and the illusion of growth returned, but this time, it was fueled by debt. By 2022, the price of that illusion arrived: inflation. For the first time in a generation, Australians faced rapidly rising costs for essentials: food, energy, housing, transport. The Reserve Bank began a cycle of aggressive rate hikes, lifting the cash rate from 0.1% to over 4% in just 18 months. Mortgage repayments doubled, rents soared, small businesses closed. What looked like resilience was, in truth, exposure. Decades of policy built around consumption, property, and population had made the economy brittle. A single shock like COVID or the global inflation wave revealed just how thin the foundation was. Behind record GDP numbers, GDP per person, the measure that shows how much wealth each Australian actually gains, had been flat since 2012. In fact, by 2024, real household income had fallen for 5 straight quarters. But GDP headlines kept flashing growth. The illusion persisted, because growth looked good on paper, but on the ground, Australians were working harder, earning less, and feeling trapped in the economy that didn't seem to reward effort anymore. The turning point wasn't one single crash, it was the realization that the miracle had quietly stopped working. The system hadn't collapsed, it had stagnated. And in the years ahead, the consequences would reach every corner of society. For the first time in decades, Australians were beginning to ask a question they hadn't asked since the 1990s. What happens if the lucky country runs out of luck? The structural weakness no one fixed for decades. The foundation of Australia's prosperity has rested on three pillars: mining, migration, money. Each one powerful, each one profitable, and each one quietly turning the economy into something more fragile than it appeared. The first pillar, mining, built the nation's wealth. Iron ore, coal, gas, gold. The world's appetite seemed endless. When China began its industrial rise, Australia became its quarry. By 2015, over 1/3 of Australia's export income came from just two commodities, iron ore and coal. Entire states became dependent on the next shipment, the next boom. But mining is a double-edged sword. It drives currency strength, making everything else harder to sell abroad. And when prices fall, the wealth vanishes overnight. As resources soared, other industries withered. Manufacturing that once employed millions slowly faded, from cars and steel to electronics and textiles. By 2020, manufacturing accounted for barely 5% of Australia's GDP, the lowest in its modern history. The lucky country stopped building things and started digging them. Cut to montage of airports, student crowds, city traffic. The second pillar was migration. Population growth became the secret ingredient of Australia's growth story. Each new resident meant more consumption, more housing demand, more apparent economic activity. And while immigration has enriched Australia culturally and economically, it also masked something deeper: stagnant productivity. Productivity growth 2012 to 2024. Flatline. Between 2012 and 2024, output per worker barely moved. Instead of getting richer by doing things better, Australia grew by simply adding more people. GDP went up, but GDP per person, the real measure of prosperity, plateaued. But then there's the third pillar: money, easy credit, cheap borrowing, and a housing system built on speculation. For decades, Australian households were encouraged, even celebrated, for taking on massive debt to buy property. It became a national obsession. Homes weren't just shelters anymore, they were wealth machines. Banks grew rich, governments collected taxes, and entire generations came to believe that housing prices would only ever go up. By 2023, household debt had reached more than 180% of disposable income, of the highest ratios on earth. The economy became addicted to property, as if growth itself depended on people borrowing more. And in a way, it did. Together, these three pillars, mining, migration, and money, kept Australia's GDP rising, but they also made the system vulnerable. When commodity prices dropped, or when borders closed, or when interest rates rose, the whole illusion trembled. This wasn't a sudden failure, it was a slow drift, a comfortable decline disguised as progress. The numbers behind the mirage: in 2024, its GDP reached more than 2.4 trillion Australian dollars, placing it among the world's top 15 economies. Unemployment hovered near 4%. Inflation, though high, was easing. But beneath the surface, a different picture emerges. Adjust for population growth, and the miracle evaporates. GDP per person, the wealth each citizen effectively enjoys, has been stagnant for over a decade. In 2023, real GDP per capita fell for 3 consecutive quarters, an event economists quietly called a recession. It's not that Australians stopped working there, working more often, multiple jobs. But the reward for that effort has barely moved. Real wages today are roughly where they were back in 2013. Meanwhile, the cost of living has surged. Food prices are up 25% since 2020. Electricity bills have jumped nearly 30%, and rents in some cities have risen by more than 50% in just 2 years. Compared with other developed economies, the pattern is clear. Canada faced similar housing booms, but invested more in productivity and innovation. Germany built industrial strength through exports, though now struggling with its own energy crisis. The UK, like Australia, leaned too heavily on finance and property, and now faces similar stagnation. Australia's story sits between them all, with the appearance of prosperity, but the reality of imbalance, household debt, among the world's highest productivity, among the lowest in the OECD wage, growth, almost flat, yet the stock market rises, the skyline expands, the government celebrates record growth. The contradiction is striking: an economy growing, but its people not feeling richer. Economists call this a two-speed economy, one world for those who own assets, property, shares, or business, and another for those who rent, work, and survive. That divide widens each year, eroding the social contract that once made Australia different. The belief that everyone could get ahead through effort. Show night skyline of Melbourne, glittering lights slowly fading to black dot. The numbers tell a simple truth. The strength of an economy cannot be measured only by how much it grows, but by how widely that growth is shared. The cost of living, the price of dreams for decades. The Australian dream was simple: work hard, buy a home, raise a family, and enjoy the sunshine of stability. But today, that dream feels like it's slipping away. Across the country, home ownership, once a symbol of success, is drifting out of reach. In Sydney and Melbourne, the median house price now sits above 1.3 million Australian dollars. For a young worker earning the average wage, that means saving for 14 to 16 years just for a deposit. A 28-year-old teacher speaks directly to camera. "I do everything they told us to. I went to uni, got a degree, work full-time, and still, I can't afford a home in the city I grew up in." The property market has turned from a promise into a pressure. Families take on record levels of debt just to stay afloat. Interest rates rise, and suddenly, dreams turn into sleepless nights. The average mortgage repayment in Australia has more than doubled in the past 3 years. Renters fare no better, with queues stretching outside rental inspections like ticket lines for concerts. Every time my lease ends, I feel sick. It's like playing musical chairs, but there's never enough homes. And it's not just about housing. Everyday life, the simple act of living, is becoming more expensive. Groceries that once cost $100 now reach $150. A full tank of petrol feels like a luxury. Power bills keep rising, even as wages stand still. These are not isolated stories. They're the quiet soundtrack of a generation under strain. 40% of renters spend more than one of their income on housing. 1 in 5 households skips meals to pay bills. Credit card defaults have reached their highest point since 2008. The numbers are cold, but the reality they describe is deeply human. Young Australians face a choice no generation before them had to make. Do you work harder just to stand still, or do you leave searching for opportunity elsewhere? A 25-year-old IT graduate in Brisbane. "Sometimes I look at Canada or Europe. They pay more, rent's cheaper, life feels balanced. Here, it's just survival." It's a sentiment that's spreading. Between 2022 and 2024, tens of thousands of skilled young workers left Australia for better prospects overseas. Economists call it brain drain, but for many, it's simply escape. Meanwhile, older Australians, many of whom built their wealth through property, watch uneasily. They see their own children struggling in the same cities where they once thrived. On an elderly couple in Perth. "We bought our house for $80,000 in the 1980s. Now it's worth $1.2 million. We should be happy, but how can our kids ever buy one?" The gap between generations is widening, not just in wealth, but in worldview. For one, home ownership is proof of success. For the other, it's a distant fantasy. Beneath these struggles lies a quiet erosion of trust. Trust in the system. Trust in leaders. Trust that tomorrow will be better than today. Politicians speak of resilience, growth, and strong fundamentals, but for millions, those words ring hollow, because you can't eat GDP, you can't live inside statistics. And you can't tell a struggling family that the economy is fine when they're choosing between rent and groceries. Fade to black. Soft ambient music returns, melancholic yet hopeful. For all its beauty, opportunity, and promise, Australia's economy is leaving too many behind. But this isn't the end of the story, because while the system feels unbalanced, change is possible. The question is, will Australia face its uncomfortable truths before it's too late? The debate over Australia's future. Ask 5 economists what's wrong with Australia's economy, and you'll get 6 answers. but most agree on one thing: the prosperity model that worked for 40 years can't last forever. Dr. Danielle Wood, Grattan Institute Archival Tone. We built growth on population and housing. That creates the illusion of momentum, but not productivity. Productivity, the true measure of progress, has flatlined since 2015. For every hour Australians work, output has barely moved. The Reserve Bank's 2024 report warned that structural weaknesses in competitiveness threaten long-term living standards. We've become a two-speed nation. Miners thrive, but manufacturing and tech lag. When China sneezes, we catch pneumonia. Others point to an over-reliance on immigration to mask underlying problems. Population growth lifts GDP, but not always GDP per person. Between 2022 and 2024, Australia's population grew faster than almost any other developed nation, but real wages fell by nearly 4%. More people, same pie, smaller slices. We're competing with us firms for talent, but can't match their pay or stability. Government support stops at slogans. Some experts say the fix lies in innovation, not austerity. Australia invests less than 1.8% of GDP in research and development, compared to over 3% in South Korea and Germany. That, as one policy researcher puts it, if we keep digging things out of the ground instead of building new industries, we'll run out of luck before we run out of minerals. Interest rates rise to fight inflation, but each increase crushes household budgets. Economists argue over the right balance: protect growth or fight prices. Meanwhile, ordinary Australians live between those statistics, fade between graphs, protests, and quiet domestic scenes. Visual contrast of macro versus micro. The path forward, the question isn't whether Australia can recover, it's whether it's ready to evolve. Economists outline three paths: reform, diversify, or decline. Reform, modernize taxation, target investment, and boost innovation. We can't keep taxing work more than wealth. One expert says, if capital gains remain untouchable, the housing bubble never ends. Diversify, strengthen manufacturing, green energy, and digital industries. Australia could lead the world in renewables, but needs ambition matching its sunlight. Decline, the silent option, doing nothing and hoping mining rescues us again. Some sparks of hope already flicker. Renewable projects in Western Australia. Tech accelerators in Melbourne. Education reforms in Queensland, each one small, but together they hint at a shift, because change in economies rarely begins with governments. It begins with individuals, entrepreneurs, students, families refusing to accept stagnation as destiny. The next decade will test whether Australia can move beyond its comfort zone. From luck to leadership. From mining to minding the future, the world is watching, not because of crisis, but because of potential. A nation between sunshine and shadow for 2 centuries, Australia's story was one of expansion, a land that always seemed to have more land, more luck, more promise. But in the 21st century, that narrative has changed. The challenge now is not about having more, it's about doing better. Economies are not just numbers, they are human stories written in bills, wages, and hopes. And beneath Australia's glowing GDP charts lies a quiet truth. Strength isn't how loud your success sounds, it's how well your people live. The statistics may say stable, the analysts may say strong, but the people, the heartbeat of the economy, tell another story. A story of resilience tested, dreams delayed, and courage rediscovered. Because despite everything, the costs, the cracks, the uncertainty, Australians still wake up every morning and keep going. That, more than any GDP figure, is what makes this nation truly strong. Why Australia's economy isn't as strong as it looks. Written and narrated for those still chasing the Australian dream.